The neighborhood froze at the piercing screech that shattered the morning calm. Karen, the self-anointed HOA queen, came barreling down my gravel trail on my ATV, looking like she was starring in a Laurent action flick. She stood half up on the seat, one hand flailing like she was directing a storm, the other death-gripping the handlebars, knuckles ghostly white. What she didn't know was my ATV wasn't some run-of-the-mill toy. It was a beast, tricked out with facial recognition, GPS fencing, and a self-locking security system. I watched it all unfold from my porch, coffee in hand, as my security system streamed the chaos in glorious 4K. And trust me, this was just the opening act. Rewind 48 hours, and life was as close to normal as it gets under Karen's HOA tyranny. She'd strong-armed her way into the president's chair during a shady emergency vote, calling the old leader to soft on rule breakers and absurd citations. Think penalties for unruly wind chimes or grass blades leaning the wrong way. My ATV became her latest fixation. Parked behind my garage, out of sight, it still managed to offend her pristine suburban vision, its tempting children, and ruining our community's image. Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation with the HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Room full of residents, many of whom secretly owned their own monstrosities, just stared at her. I raised my hand calmly. Karen, it's parked on my property behind a privacy fence, and it hasn't moved in 2 weeks. Her eyes narrowed, like she had just caught me admitting to grand theft. It doesn't matter, she hissed. The HOA has jurisdiction over all recreational vehicles. Page 14, subsection G. I checked after that meeting. I knew she was coming for it. What she didn't know was that I wasn't the kind of person who left things unsecured. The ATV had cost me nearly 20 grand to build, with a Militera ignition, lock, fingerprint start override, and a facial recognition scan that could identify intruders within 3 seconds. It could be remotely shut down, tracked, and even send alerts directly to my phone. I called it my off-road baby, not just because I loved riding it, but because it was smarter than half the tech at NASA. The morning of the incident, I was sipping coffee and scrolling through my weather app when my phone buzzed. Unauthorized vehicle access detected, facial match not found. I blinked, my security camera feed opened automatically. There she was, Karen in full view. Her pink velour tracksuit clashed horrendously with the matte black of my ATV. She clambered onto it like she had just discovered the cure for boredom. My jaw dropped as she hit the ignition button and the system blinked. Override attempt detected. She slapped the console and the engine growled to life. I activated the external mic. Karen, what are you doing? I said firmly into the speaker. She froze, glanced around, then flipped off the camera like a teenager caught sneaking out. It's a HOA property now, she screamed. You left it on unapproved terrain. And then she took off down the path behind my house, cutting across multiple lots like she was leading a cavalry charge into enemy lines. By this point, I was already dialing the local sheriff's office. Not 911. This wasn't a life-threatening emergency, but it was definitely criminal. While on hold, my phone pinged again. Security breach, throttle lock, initiated. The facial recognition had failed 3 times in a row. That triggered the auto-lock protocol. I pulled up the GPS overlay and watched the little dot slow to a crawl, then stopped the camera. switched angles, and showed Karen mid-scream. As the ATV came to a sudden halt, her foot slipped, her hands flailed, and then gravity did the rest. She landed hard, real hard, in a shallow, muddy ditch that always flooded when the sprinklers ran too long. For a full 5 seconds, she didn't move. Then, in true Karen fashion, she sat up, wiped a fistful of muck off her face, and started shrieking into the void like someone had just stolen her diamonds. She flagged down a passing jogger and launched into a dramatic monologue about being kidnapped by rogue neighbors and dumped out here in the wild. The cops arrived faster than I expected. Maybe they were already nearby, or maybe someone else in the neighborhood had called in a noise complaint. Either way, they found Karen sitting on a broken lawn chair someone had tossed near the ditch, looking like a war refugee with a grudge. "He booby-trapped the ATV," she declared it. "Tried to kill me." One officer raised an eyebrow. "You mean the vehicle that you took without permission and drove across private land?" Karen's eyes darted back and forth. "I was relocating it for safety," she insisted. "I met them at the scene a few minutes later. I had printed out the security logs, facial scan failures, and GPS tracking report." The officers took one look at the evidence. One of them said, "You do realize this could be considered grand theft, right? Commandeer vehicles." Karen was let off with a warning. For now, the cops decided to treat it as a civil matter. Unless I chose to press charges, I held off, not because I pitied her, but because I had something better in mind. By that evening, I had edited the footage into a neat little clip and sent it to our neighborhood group chat. No caption. HOA meeting. Cut to her stealing the ATV and ended with her flying into the ditch in slow motion, complete with a dramatic orchestral sting. Reactions poured in instantly. The laughing emojis never stopped. But Karen wasn't done, not even close. I knew her well enough by now to expect that this was just the beginning, and I was ready, because what she didn't realize was that my tech didn't just stop her joyride. It documented everything, her every move, her every lie, her every step into the quicksand of HOA tyranny. And while she thought she was running the show, she had no idea that she had just triggered a chain of events that would blow her entire house of cards straight into the mud. Karen's face was still red from humiliation when she stomped into the next HOA meeting, hair half dried from the ditch water, and her voice more shrill than ever. She didn't even wait for the meeting to be called to order. She barged right up to the front table, slammed her clipboard down like she was declaring war, and pointed at me. "This man is a danger to the neighborhood," she shouted. Everyone turned to look at her, unsure if this was a joke or a nervous breakdown. One of the board members, Rick, tried to de-escalate. "Karen, let's take our seats and go over the agenda first." But Karen was already on a tirade about new bylaws, unauthorized equipment, and how I had supposedly booby-trapped an innocent community volunteer vehicle. The sheer level of delusion would have been laughable if it wasn't being said with so much authority. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The video had already done the talking for me. It had been viewed over 100 times on our neighborhood group chat, and now lived on 3 local Facebook pages. Karen's glorious ATV dive had become meme material within 24 hours. Kids were imitating her fall at bus stop. Someone even pasted her face onto a flying superhero with the caption, "Karen, defender of the rules breaker of her own spine." So as she fumed about HOA jurisdiction and unauthorized motor units, nobody was listening. Her voice was drowned out by silent eye rolls and muffled chuckles, but numbers and a statement of use. This will prevent dangerous machinery from endangering our families, she insisted. She looked right at me, clearly trying to bait a reaction. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, and smirked. Rick raised a hand. So, you're saying we need to document every grill generator, lawnmower, and wheelbarrow in the entire? The room fell into stunned silence. Then a quiet voice from the back muttered, "What the hell does theoretical risk even mean?" Had seen how far she was willing to go to cling to power instead of apologizing for stealing and crashing someone else's property. She was doubling down and trying to regulate the entire neighborhood like a mini dictator. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me quietly in the parking lot. One of them, a woman named June, who had lived there for 30 years, whispered, "She's going to burn the whole HOA down, trying to prove she's right. We have to stop her." That night, I started getting messages. People were fed up. They shared their own Karen stories, how she had issued warnings for hanging bird feeders, how she had threatened fines for using non-approved mulch colors. One neighbor said she even received a warning for her lawn flamingo, which Karen claimed didn't reflect the aesthetic unity of the subdivision. A small rebellion was forming, not through loud protest, but quiet networking. A few of us decided to meet in person. Just coffee, no official business, just a talk, but that talk turned into something more. We met at Rick's place 3 nights later. It was a casual gathering. At first, 6 of us showed up, then 8, then 15. We weren't plotting anything illegal, we just wanted to organize. We knew we needed to follow the rules if we were going to take Karen down from within. A recall petition, a special vote, procedural justice. Rick brought out the HOA bylaws binder, a thick, dusty thing with yellowed pages and vague wording, and we combed through every line of it. For a path forward, Karen must have sensed the shift because she started showing up everywhere. With a clipboard and a glare, she patrolled the sidewalks like a mall cop, peering over fences and taking photos of backyard. The more we resisted, the tighter she tried to squeeze. She issued 3 new warnings in a week to families who had never even received a single violation, before one man got fined for leaving his trash bin at the curb. 15 minutes after collection, another got cited for unregulated hammock mounting. Then came the towing incident. I was at work when I got the call from my neighbor Phil. "Hey man, there's a tow truck in your driveway." I nearly dropped my lunch. I pulled up my home camera feed, and sure enough, a beat-up white truck was reversing toward the side of my garage, backing up to where the ATV usually sat. The problem was, I had moved the ATV into the garage the night before. What the tow driver was actually trying to hook up to was a covered grill and an old dolly with flat tires. But the kicker was that Karen was standing right there, pointing and shouting directions like she was the queen of code enforcement. I tapped into the ATV's security audio and activated the mic. "Step away from the property, Karen," I said through the speaker. She jumped, looked around, then barked at the driver to keep going. The second he tried to lift anything, my garage alarm blared, lights flashed, the floodlight on the side of the house turned on. The driver panicked, dropped the hitch and peeled out, leaving tire tracks in my lawn. Karen screamed at the empty air, still convinced this was all within her rights. The video went viral again, this time not just among neighbors, but through a broader network of HOA horror story groups online. Karen and the unauthorized tow job racked up over 50 0 views. People were tagging it with hashtag ATV justice and hash Karen can't drive. I started receiving messages from HOA members in other towns, all telling me to keep fighting, to stay sharp, and offering tips on how to survive. A power-hungry board member. But the best message came from within my own neighborhood. Rick texted, "It's time, let's do the petition." We met again, this time with printed sheet. We needed signatures from 30% of HOA members to trigger a recall vote. It took 2 days. People came to us. They signed eagerly. Even the more passive residents, who usually stayed out of HOA business, were stepping forward. Now Karen wasn't just annoying anymore. She was a liability. She was making life miserable. But when Karen found out, she went full scorched earth. She started issuing citations to everyone who had signed the petition. She dug through archived violations and mailed out retroactive warnings. Some people received 4 or 5 notices in a single day. One guy had to tape them together just to keep track of what she was accusing him of. She printed out the petition list and taped it to her fence with the title, "Neighborhood Traitors." Things were getting out of hand. We knew we couldn't wait much longer. Rick submitted the petition formally, and the countdown to a vote began. Karen responded by calling an emergency community safety inspection and tried to enter my property uninvited, but she didn't know I had upgraded the ATV system again, this time with a voice recorder. She walked right up to it, said out loud that she needed to get rid of this junk once and for all, and tried to pull a decal off the frame. That single sentence was all I needed. Her own words captured clearly. We had her by the end of the week. The board had scheduled a formal hearing. Karen still acted like she was untouchable, but even her inner circle had started distancing themselves. She was losing grip. Her clipboard had become a symbol of mockery instead of power, and she had no clue that the very ATV she tried to banish was now the key to her downfall. The trap had been set. The neighborhood was ready. The clock was ticking. The morning after, Karen's little voice recorded confession at my ATV. I walked outside with a quiet grin and a flash drive in my pocket. That audio was pure gold, clean, crisp, unmistakably her whispering threats about getting rid of my junk while attempting to peel off a security decal, like she was part of some HOA undercover task force. She had no idea the system was listening. She thought she was clever, sneaking around under the cover of dusk with her oversized sunglasses and faux leather gloves like a cartoon villain. But she underestimated the one thing that always gets people like her in trouble. Technology never blinks, and it never forgets. By the time I arrived at the HOA hearing, the boardroom was already buzzing. This wasn't just any meeting. It was an official grievance session, called after our successful petition had forced the HOA to respond to Karen's growing list of abuses. Residents lined the walls, some sitting on windowsills, others standing near the door. It was the largest crowd any HOA gathering had ever seen. Karen walked in, last of course, carrying her clipboard like it was a royal decree. Her posture was stiff, chin high, like she still thought she owned the room. But the atmosphere had changed. Gone were the differential nods and polite greetings. People avoided eye contact. Some crossed their arms or subtly turned their back. Rick, sitting at the center of the board table, cleared his throat and began reading from the complaint list. It included everything from the attempted towing to overreach of authority, harassment, and retaliatory fines issued against petition signers. Karen barely flinched when he finished. She stood slowly and opened her folder with a dramatic flair. "I have here Over 50 pages of violations, all logged and documented, she said, tapping her stack like it was the final word. Each of these residents knowingly broke rules, and instead of correcting their behavior, they've colluded in a personal attack against me. This isn't about the HOA, this is about one man who cannot accept authority. She locked eyes with me, expecting me to squirm. I didn't. When Rick invited me to speak, I stepped up calmly, placed the flash drive on the table, and pushed it toward the board. I'd like to submit this audio recording into the meeting record, I said. It contains clear evidence of premeditated tampering, abuse of authority, and trespassing on my property. Karen stiffened. Her eyes darted toward the board as they plugged it in. Then the audio played. The room went dead silent. Karen's voice came through crystal clear. I'll get rid of this junk once and for all. No one's going to trace it to me. If I peel this off first, then the scraping of her nails on the decal, then her muttered complaint. Stupid techie freak thinks he can outsmart me. There was no mistaking her. Even the most neutral board members leaned back in their chairs with raised eyebrows. One woman gasped quietly. Karen looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under her. She opened her mouth closed. It then fumbled for words that's completely out of context. I was inspecting a community hazard, she blurted. I never touched anything, but no one was buying it anymore. Rick rubbed his temples inside. Karen, this recording doesn't support your version of events. It contradicts your reports. And worse, it shows intent to tamper. Karen's defenses crumbled fast. She tried to regain footing by accusing the board of favoritism. She claimed the recording was fake, manipulated, and that I had used AI voice cloning, which earned her a few stifled laughs from the back row. Then, in a final, desperate move, she declared that she would sue the HOA for defamation if they dared to discipline her. Rick just calmly slid the bylaws binder across the table toward her. You're welcome to try, but according to Section 4, Article 6, the board has every right to remove a president who violates community trust or misuses authority, which as of today includes criminal trespassing, unapproved towing attempts, and retaliation against residents. Karen was officially suspended from the HOA board, pending removal vote. That should have been the end of it, but she wasn't done, not by a long shot. Within a day of the hearing, she filed a civil lawsuit against me personally, claiming emotional distress, reputational harm, and property damage. She argued that my reckless vehicle had caused her fall and that I had weaponized surveillance technology against a public servant. Her lawyer was her cousin Greg, a paralegal with a YouTube degree in legal studies and a track record of suing fast food restaurants for cold fries. The whole thing would have been hilarious if not for the fact that they actually filed real paperwork with the county courthouse. I didn't panic. I gathered my documents, prints, system logs, and video timestamp. My garage cam had caught every second of the incident. My security software had preserved the metadata. I even had her GPS trail from when she first trespassed onto my property. But the ace in my pocket was that the very ATV she tried to steal was registered as part of a work-from-home development project I'd been running. It was listed in my company's insurance. So, when her claim alleged that I had left an unmonitored and dangerous piece of equipment in public, I was able to produce documentation proving it was a secured and actively monitored research device on private property with restricted access. When we went to court, she showed up wearing a neck brace and limping like she'd just escaped a demolition derby. The judge looked at her, then at the video footage of her hopping onto the ATV like a child at a carnival and nearly burst into laughter. The cross-examination was brutal. Karen couldn't explain why she was on the property. She couldn't explain why she ignored the voice warning. She couldn't explain how my ATV's self-locking feature triggered a sudden stop, and yet somehow I was to blame. Her cousin Greg kept objecting, mostly to stall, but each objection was overruled faster than the last. When the judge finally spoke, she didn't hold back. "Miss Karen," she said, "you're not just wasting this court's time. You're playing the victim after committing theft. This case is dismissed with prejudice. You're lucky he hasn't filed charges against you." Karen's face turned the color of an overripe tomato. She tried to protest, but the gavel came down. Case closed. But the fallout had only just begun. By the time we left the courthouse, someone had already posted screenshots of the hearing transcript to Reddit. By Smart ATV hit the front page of Entitled People. The clip of her in the neck brace, juxtaposed with her ATV joyride, became a meme overnight. A local podcaster invited me on to talk about tech justice in the BBS. People were stopping me at gas stations to laugh and ask if the ATV was available for pre-order. Meanwhile, back in our community, the HOA board didn't even wait for the next meeting. They emailed all residents that a special vote would be held within 5 days to formally remove Karen from any leadership role. It wasn't even close. Over 90% voted her out. When Rick read the final tally aloud, a neighbor popped champagne on their porch. Karen responded by storming around the neighborhood in full meltdown mode. She tried to tape a flyer on every mailbox, accusing me of cyberstalking and defamation, but the new rules passed by the board made unauthorized postings a violation. Every flyer was taken down within hours. Karen still had her house. No one could change that, but she had lost the clipboard, the control, and the illusion of authority she'd built for herself. Now, every time she walked past the community park, kids made a TV engine noises and yelled, "Facial ID denied." Her clipboard disappeared. Mysteriously, someone replaced it with a rubber chicken duct taped to her fence. She didn't laugh. She rarely left the house. As for me, I went back to my life. I upgraded the ATV one more time, added voice command, and synced it to my home system. It responded now with a cheerful chime whenever I stepped near. "Welcome back, Karen." Not detected. The neighborhood was healing, but I knew Karen wasn't finished. People like her never surrender. They just reload. I stayed ready because if she came for me again, she wouldn't just be facing an engineer with an ATV. She'd be facing a whole neighborhood that had finally had enough. It was a quiet Sunday morning when the ping hit my phone again. At first, I figured it was just a routine motion alert, maybe a squirrel or someone walking their dog a little too close to the driveway. But when I tapped the screen, the camera feed loaded, and there she was. Karen, back again, wearing a floppy hat and hoodie, like she was undercover on a secret mission, which only made her look more suspicious. She was crouched near the garage, glancing around nervously, while holding a plastic bag in one hand and a screwdriver in the other. And like clockwork, she made a beeline straight for the ATV. I watched in disbelief as she knelt beside the vehicle and began trying to pry off one of the security decals, the same one she had attempted to peel weeks ago when she confessed her plan out loud. This time, she was being extra cautious, probably thinking silence would save her, but my system had evolved. Since then, alongside motion detection and voice recording, I had added heat signature mapping and a new sensor that automatically flagged known faces from the HOA's own meeting archive. Karen's face, no matter what hoodie she wore, was in that database. With a blinking red border, I didn't go outside, I didn't yell or make a scene. I simply sat on my couch and recorded everything while alerting the HOA board chat within 10 minutes. Rick and another board member named Alicia were walking up the street. In real time, having just finished a visit at another house. I didn't even have to tell them where she was. Karen was too preoccupied with her sabotage attempt to notice them until they were standing right behind her. Karen, Rick said sharply. She jumped like she'd been tasered. The bag in her hand dropped, revealing 3 peeled decals and what looked like a stolen faux sign from a neighbor's lawn. She tried to fumble an explanation, her words tripping over each other. I was just trying to. These weren't compliant. They're a violation of visual perception. Harmony clause. There's no such clause, Alicia replied, holding up her phone. And this is private property. You're trespassing again. After being warned, after being suspended, what are you thinking? Karen stood up straight, tried to regain her usual control. I'm the real protector of this community, she declared, pointing at the ATV like it was a nuclear warhead. No one else is willing to keep things in order. If I don't stop this machine, it'll be used for God knows what. Rick's sighed, looked at me through the camera, and gave me a small nod. That was all I needed. I hit a button on my app, and the system switched to live stream with speaker mode. I spoke firmly. Karen, you've now broken at least 3 new HOA rules, state trespassing laws, and you're interfering with a registered security device. The entire incident is being recorded and transmitted to the county inspector. Just like last time, please leave the property. Now Karen snapped, not in the quiet, bitter way she had during the hearing, but in a full-volume meltdown. She started screaming about conspiracies, corruption, false neighbors, and how the entire board had been compromised by a tech cult. People began peeking through windows and opening doors as her voice echoed down the block. Alicia, always the calm one, gently pulled her away from the garage and said, "We're calling the police now." "Karen, it's over. You need help." Karen stormed away in defeat. But the incident had already solidified what the entire community had started to suspect. She wasn't just controlling, she had crossed over into dangerous territory. That evening, the HLA board held an emergency vote via online portal, allowing every resident to weigh in on a permanent ban from all community leadership roles and common areas. The results weren't even close. 93% approved her full removal and revocation of her privileges. Karen would no longer be allowed to attend meetings, issue citations, or enter community facilities. It was the final nail in the coffin, but like a horror villain who refuses to stay down, Karen made one last desperate attempt to reclaim her power. A week later, flyers started showing up in everyone's mailboxes, not official HOA notices, but clearly printed by Karen herself. The paper was bright yellow with bold red letters. Across the top, "The HOA is lying to you." The rest was a rambling manifesto about surveillance drones, neighborhood mind control, and how the ATV was secretly funded by a rogue government experiment. "She accused me of being a cybercriminal," said Rick. "Was a plant sent by lobbyists," and even implied that Alicia was an undercover FBI agent using fake landscaping licenses. The neighborhood didn't panic. They laughed. One neighbor took a photo of the flyer and turned it into a jigsaw puzzle. Another laminated it and put it in their bathroom as reading material. Someone even mocked up a fake movie poster. Karen Ho of shadows, rated K for cook. Still, the board reported her for harassment, and the county sent her a formal cease and desist letter. The next day, meanwhile, I decided it was time to restore some normalcy to the neighborhood. I held an informal open house barbecue in my backyard, complete with a short ATV demonstration for curious neighbors who wanted to see the infamous machine for themselves. I kept it friendly, light-hearted, and completely open. No secret, just food, drinks, and a chance for people to laugh off the last few months. It turned into the biggest gathering our community had seen in years. Kids rode mini at verses around a makeshift track, while adults shared their Karen run-ins like war stories. Someone even brought a cake shaped like a clipboard. I was mid-burger flip when Alicia pulled me aside and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a thank you note from several longtime residents, along with a community commendation the board had created just for this occasion for commitment to peace, patience, and properly deployed ATV justice. It read. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the spatula, but it meant a lot for once. Instead of HOA politics tearing people apart, it had brought them closer together. Karen, for all her drama, had accidentally reminded the entire neighborhood why community matters and why no one person should ever hold unchecked power. She moved away shortly after the Sandist, quietly packing a U-Haul late at night. Rumor had it she was trying to run for board president in a new subdivision across town, but word travels fast. Within days, someone had linked a thread on the Entitled People subreddit with her name, face, and everything she had pulled here. That campaign didn't last a week. As for me, I upgraded the ATV one last time. This time, it could read voice, tone, detect aggressive language, and send early alerts to my phone if it picked up signs of Karen-level hostility. Not because I was worried she'd come back, but because the next HOA, Karen, might be subtler. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I parked the ATV near the neighborhood entrance. As a joke, I added a small cardboard sign that read, "Smile Facial ID in progress." People laughed, took photos, and even asked if I was going to sell versions online. I considered it, but the best moment came when Rick walked by, clapped me on the shoulder, and said, "You know, I used to think HOA drama was the worst thing about living here, but thanks to you and that ATV, it's finally entertaining." I smiled, looked out over the peaceful street, and for the first time in months, truly relaxed. The lawn was quiet, the clipboard was gone, the tyrant had fallen, and best of all, the neighborhood had finally reclaimed its sanity, not with lawsuits or shouting, but with unity, humor, and a very clever machine. Karen thought she was the future of order. Turns out, she was just a loud speed bump on the road to something better. The peace that followed Karen's final meltdown felt almost surreal, like someone had lifted a heavy storm cloud from above the neighborhood. For the first time in months, there were no strange warnings taped to doors, no paranoid surveillance patrols, no impromptu HOA meetings called under flimsy pretenses. Life began to return to its natural rhythm. Kids playing on front lawns, neighbors waving instead of whispering behind hedges, and weekends cookouts without someone lurking nearby taking photos of who parked where. Karen's absence was felt, but not missed. It was the kind of quiet that came not from emptiness, but from relief, with the community united again, and the HOA operating under its newly restructured leadership. The board turned its focus toward healing and improving the neighborhood's morale. One idea stood out immediately: an appreciation event to celebrate resilience, humor, and yes, even the unlikeliest hero in all this chaos. The suggestion came from June, the elderly neighbor who'd been documenting Karen's odd behavior for over a year. She proposed what she called a TV Appreciation Day. At first, people laughed, assuming it was a joke. But when the flyer went out, the response was overwhelming. Families volunteered food kits, offered to help decorate, and someone even offered a bounce house shaped like a tiny engine block. When the day arrived, it felt like a block party straight out of a movie. Neighbors who had rarely spoken to each other were now sharing stories over lemonade and potato salad, swapping tales of HOA citations. Like war medals, in the center of it all stood the ATV, polished, waxed, and fully operational. Someone had tied red, white, and blue streamers to the handlebars, and a small speaker inside it played the Rocky theme every hour. Kids posed for photos next to it. Parents asked if they could take it for a spin just around the cul-de-sac. I had to explain again and again that it wasn't just a toy, it was a security machine wired with features most people wouldn't believe unless they saw the control dashboard for themselves. What none of us expected was Karen's return, at least not like this. Midway through the event, someone noticed a beige sedan parked across the street from the festivities. The windows were rolled halfway down, and inside sat Karen's sunglasses on, silently watching from behind the wheel. She hadn't stepped foot in the neighborhood since her official banishment weeks ago. Some thought she had moved for good. Others thought she might attempt another power grab in some distant suburb. But here she was, parked like a ghost at her own funeral, witnessing everything she lost. People noticed but didn't approach. No one jeered, no one waved. They simply acknowledged her presence, then went back to their conversations, laughter, and celebration. That stung her more than any insult. She wasn't feared anymore. She wasn't even relevant. She had become background noise, just a footnote in the neighborhood's recovery. After about 20 minutes of being ignored, she put the car in gear and drove off, slow and bitter, like someone retreating from a battlefield they thought they owned. That was the last time anyone saw her around here. In the weeks that followed, things only improved. The HOA's new president, a retired city planner named Nanan, introduced transparency reforms that made sure no single person could ever dominate the board again. Votes were held digitally, bylaws were reviewed publicly, residents had more say than ever before. One of the first acts under the new system was the removal of all fines issued by Karen that had no basis in the official rulebook. People got their money back. The flamingos returned, hammocks were rehung, even the controversial pink mailbox that Karen once called visual pollution was freshly painted and more vibrant than ever. As for me, I kept upgrading the ATV, though now it was more out of passion than necessity. I added a solar panel to the top so it could charge itself during idle hours, and a custom welcome greeting, triggered by facial recognition. The message was light-hearted, designed to amuse the kids. Welcome friend, facial ID approved, neighborhood sanity at optimal level. I even renamed it. Officially, it wasn't just the ATV anymore. It had earned its title. From that point forward, it was called Karen Buster. One morning I walked outside to find a gift basket sitting on the ATV seat. No note, no signature. Inside were cookies, sparkling cider, and a handmade keychain shaped like a clipboard, snapped in half. The symbolism was unmistakable. The neighborhood had embraced the full journey, the chaos, the absurdity, the battles, and the victories. Somehow we had turned one woman's obsessive control into a bonding experience for an entire community. Still, I wasn't naive enough to believe we were immune to future drama. Akko always attract a few characters who think the power of a title makes them invincible. But after what we'd all been through, people were wiser, more alert, and much, much quicker to speak up. Karen had shown us the danger of staying silent, of letting one voice drown out the others. The neighborhood had survived, not because someone yelled the loudest, but because enough of us refused to back down, refused to be bullied, and learned how to use our strengths. Mine just happened to involve tech and an off-road machine with attitude. The funniest moment came during a board meeting a few months later. Long after Karen had faded from our daily lives, someone brought up the idea of creating official HOA security patrols again, this time volunteer-based, just to keep an eye on safety concerns before anyone could suggest names. Rick raised his hand and said, "I nominate the 8." The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't meant seriously, but the sentiment was real. That machine had done more to keep order than any clipboard ever had. Neon leaned over with a grin and said, "Well, draft the paperwork. Should we give it voting rights, too?" I couldn't help but laugh, thinking of the irony. The very thing Karen tried to destroy had become the community's mascot, and somewhere out there I imagined her fuming in a new neighborhood, telling strangers about the day a smart vehicle ruined her reign in the end. This wasn't just a story about an ATV, or even about an overzealous HOA president. It was about boundaries, about knowing when to speak up, when to fight back, and how even the most ridiculous situations can spark real change. Karen thought she had the upper hand because she had a title and a clipboard. But titles don't protect you from the truth, and clipboards don't work against technology that records everything. My only regret is not installing a confetti cannon on the ATV for when she first got caught. Maybe that'll be the next upgrade. Something flashy, something symbolic, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that justice is better served with a sense of humor and a well-timed slow-motion replay. Now, as I sit on my porch and watch neighborhood kids ride their bikes past Karen Buster like it's a celebrity, I realize we're not just safer, we're stronger, not just as homeowners, but as people who now know that one bully with a badge doesn't get to define what community means, that power comes from connection, cooperation, and the occasional off-road security system with a personality of its own. Karen may have driven off in my ATV, thinking she'd won something that day, but all she really did was trigger the best thing that ever happened to this neighborhood. She gave us a reason to come together. And for that, strangely enough, I'm almost grateful, almost.